Anytime a tragic shooting makes headlines, there are always questions about the causes of this tragic event that frankly end up not being productive conversations. With politicians on the left generally making some kind of emotional plea of this time has to be different before changing very little, and those on the right triangulating blame away from an irresponsible gun culture in the US. This video is not a critique on that conversation, but rather an opportunity to present some specific measures that would make our schools safer. An important note before we start that obviously no single one of these measures is going to solve the whole problem. Guns in the United States, the gun culture, guns in schools, it's a really multifaceted problem that requires a portfolio of solutions. Some or all of these may be a part of this solution. Number one, universal background checks. A 2019 poll showed somewhere around 84% support for universal background checks from both Democratic and Republican poll participants. This already exists in many states already, essentially just a way to see if you have offenders in particular states. There's really no way to do that for guns on the federal level, so this is just one way to mitigate that. And obviously this could potentially remove some faulty situations. Number two, ending the gun show loophole. Also a very popular one that gets tossed around quite a bit is ending the gun show loophole. This is basically a political term for the sale of firearms by private sellers, which can include gun shows. This does not require the seller to conduct any sort of federal background check of the buyer. Obviously, if we were to implement universal background checks, this would negate that by one method, making this important to implement if universal background checks were also implemented. Number three, mandatory waiting period. I feel like this one's fairly self-explanatory, but this would both stop knee-jerk reaction purchases after maybe a traumatic event for a possible shooter, possibly give them time to change their mind, and allow time for appropriate interventions by parents, community, or other authorities if necessary. I usually think about a 72-hour waiting period, but there's certainly wiggle room there. Number four, no high-capacity weapons under age 25. One common criticism that you see for many of the implementations that are suggested by those on the left is that this is largely infringing on the Second Amendment. One possible solution that would help mitigate that is, okay, if you're 18 years old, handguns, smaller firearms, that's still totally fine. These higher capacity weapons are saved for a later date. This particular suggestion being 25, where both the human mind has developed some more and the required coping skills that maybe are not so prevalent in these shooters that are 18 years old coming in. This might help address that particular concern. This would just potentially limit the severity of similar events were it to happen either way. Number six, mandatory gun insurance. Also sort of self-explanatory, discourages knee-jerk purchases, which is a common thread in school shootings, would also tie weapons more closely to a particular person who bought them. Hey, it's John from Evolving Educators interrupting myself. If you find this sort of content interesting, please hit the like button to let me know. If we get 6 likes on this video, I'll publish a video about 5 key differences in schools in the United Kingdom versus the United States. Thank you so much for your support. Number 6, required community-supported letters for anyone under 25. 25 is sort of, again, a little bit of an arbitrary age number, but not so much. Basically, the idea here is that for folks under 25, that if somebody wants to purchase a firearm, that they are required to get a community-supported letter essentially saying that this particular person doesn't see any particular issues with this particular individual going and purchasing a firearm. It's sort of like, getting so many signatures to run for student council or something like that. This solves the issue of the common thread of an individual not having any prior charges. But sometimes, the community just sort of knows that maybe something's a little off about this person, and this might be one way to catch those things before they happen. Number seven is going to be a rather unpopular one, but that's okay. I think we do need to ban some weapons. We're already under the Second Amendment, not able to buy cannons. We can't buy RPGs to put on our shoulders under the Second Amendment. I really just think some choices need to be made about what the cost versus benefit analysis of having these legally in folks' hands should be. Um, I think maybe there's a middle ground somewhere where um, if these weapons exist in people's hands now, that maybe those folks are grandfathered in, but this stops the sale of new firearms in these categories would still be better than nothing. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure where the line should be drawn from this, but there needs to be some banning of some category of weapons here. Number eight, periodic mental health evaluations. These would just be regular check ins at some interval to be determined. Is it once a year, once every 3 years, by some kind of mental health professional? This would require that we fund mental health properly in this country, which it seems to be pointed to so often that there are issues, but we can't seem to find the funding to help mitigate it. But a regular kind of check-in, if we were able to support funding for it, would be able to mitigate some of these concerns. This would also solve the problem of there are no prior charges for an individual, but there may be possible concerns about the mental health stability of someone. The mental health stability of someone isn't necessarily the same all the time either. There are plenty of 30-year-olds that are doing perfectly fine, and if you check on them a year later, maybe it's a different situation. So we need to be doing regular check-ins with folks purchasing firearms. Number nine, an extensive licensing process. This is a widely accepted process with plenty of other things, driving being the biggest one. So you could sort of imagine what that process might look like. It's just, I think, yet another method to eliminate, again, knee-jerk purchases. Those ones that aren't particularly thought out or are made in the heat of a mental breakdown or of a particularly passionate moment that a young person isn't maybe equipped at that point to deal with. This would just be another method to mitigate that turning into something worse. Number 10, a gun buyback program. This is simply just to get excess guns off the street. We've seen these implemented very well in both Australia and New Zealand after some tragic shootings they've had recently. Um, if there are guns that aren't particularly accounted for, or a household has a bunch of extra ones, it's just that much more likely that one is going to get lost, or one is going to walk away, or regardless of how it happens, it just makes it more likely for it to end up in the hands of somebody that isn't supposed to have it. And if they're not supposed to have it, the likelihood is more likely than not that they're going to be doing something they shouldn't be doing with it. So any sort of buyback program that incentivizes people to maybe get some more money back for a gun that's just sitting in their house would be yet another way to help mitigate some of these problems. And there you have it, 10 possible parts of the solution to help change the culture of school shootings in the United States. All of these are parts of a solution. No single one of them is going to solve all of the problems that we're having. But by implementing a couple of them, I think we can get ourselves on the right track. Is there one in here you think I missed that you think would be helpful? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to hear about Ted Cruz's latest solution to solving school shootings, spoilers, none of the solutions I've mentioned are part of his. Check out the video in the link somewhere on this screen. Bye!